We are recording.
Welcome everyone to our class on Sefer Melitza. The Ramchal has explained to us that there's two people involved in communication, the person who's presenting, the person who's listening, the speaker and the hearer. The speaker has two jobs. His first job is to clearly conceive of what he wants to say. The second job is to translate those ideas into words which will clearly transmit what he has to say. On the receiver's side, he has to then listen to those words very carefully and then construct the message that was originally broadcast by the speaker. So we at the yeshiva, Rabbi Goldstein is fond of saying the thought, word, thought formula, which is you have a thought as the speaker, you then clothe it in words, you present it to the listener, he takes those words and reconstructs the thought. And that's called communication. Now, the problem is that there's many problems on this, problems on the side of the speaker and problems on the side of the hearer. So the Ramchal is trying to identify how to clear the message so that it'll be framed properly and expressed properly and heard properly. That's the idea. So in Sefer Higayon, he was telling us how to analyze and create ideas and order them in a systematic way. And now he wants to talk about how to present your ideas, which is the second half. After you've understood what you want to say, you now want to present it clearly. So that's where Melitza comes in. It's a book about speech and how to present your material in a way that you can best make sure that the hearer will be able to reconstruct your ideas. So in the first chapter, he told us that speech has two functions. There's the magid and ritzui. Magid means that you want to communicate your idea clearly to the other person. But the second part of the book, the second part of the speech, is called ritzui, and that you want your message to come across with the proper to form the proper impression. Now, both these people, the Magid and the Martzeh, have to be able to conceive of their ideas clearly, and they both have to present their ideas clearly, but there'll be different methods that the motivator has to use in order to make sure that his message is being received with the proper import and that the person who's listening will actually do it. Because there's a lot of, as Ramchal will explain, a lot of maniyas preventing a person from doing even though the things that he knows are correct to do. So the Ramchal is trying to put together this sefer in order so that we're clear communicators and also that we can motivate effectively. And that will be the function of this book. So he's told us that there's going to be rules of clear communication and there's going to be rules of motivation. Some of those will be unique to each person and some of them will overlap. Of course, whether you're a communicator or a motivator, you're going to have to be able to conceive of your ideas clearly and use language to express those ideas clearly. So the basic breakup that he spoke about and that we've seen in other Svarim, Darkei Gemara, is Inyan and Milos. There's in communication you have what you're trying to express and then the words you're trying to use. So as far as what you're trying to express, you have to check out that it's true or false. Of course, we hopefully like to express true ideas. And then we have to also determine whether the idea that you're trying to communicate is something that's well known or less known. And if it's less known or unknown, you're going to have to prove everything that you are going When it comes to the words, he's going to divide these words, use of words, into their quality, their quantity, and the order of presenting your ideas. And that's why I think we're holding in Chapter 2. So let's move to Chapter 2 inside, and we'll come back to the chart. We'll start from the beginning, even though we ran through it. It's very short. Here, Chapter 2 says the following, that the tzir hadavorim b'seichel sheyeh sholem tzarich sheyeh emet and boror. So we said the first rule is that if you're going to picture something in your mind, then if it's going to be a complete picture, then it has to be both true and it has to be clear. What does that mean? So he says, sheyeh kafi mashu b'metzius be'emes lo pochos v'yoter. When you're describing any topic, whether it be Melitza, Higayon, or Kedushin, at the end, what you want to do is to make sure that you understand the definitions clearly, and that you haven't have extraneous information or too little information to transmit to understand the idea clearly. Because remember, if you don't understand the idea, then you're not going to be able to transmit it. The second thing it has to be is boror v'lo ma'urav, and boror, he explained to us, means that everything has to fit in the proper level in the organizational chart. If you're talking about grammar, you have to talk about the letters before you can talk about the words, and then you have to talk about the sentences. So there's a certain madrega, a certain level that information has to be presented so that you can build up your picture from the simple to the complex. Okay, and he explained all those things in detail in Sefer Gayon, he says. Okay, Hanose nosu kasharim b'kol gvulim k'moshe egdamti k'moshe zacharti b'Sefer Gayon. Very good. Why? He explains, Ki quotes man shelo yotzir hadavar kain ein zurso shalom benachon. If you don't have it both true and properly ordered, then you're never going to be able to conceive of the true picture of what the subject is. And if you even if you have all the parts and they're not properly ordered, so he says it's like seeing something in the distance. It's like seeing something in the distance. It's all the parts are there, but they're confused and you don't get a clear picture of what's going on. Okay, now we're up to number 2. This is where we left off. He says, "Va'ulam k'moshe hatzir lo yushlam ela b'birozeh." Just like when you remember, you have to first picture the idea in your mind. So the picture that you have, that your thoughts have to be clear. So too, kain hadibra lo yushlam b'silato. You have to understand that your words that you're trying to communicate, the speech that you're using, the language you're using, also has to have those same elements. Ki hare ein hadibor ela hagas hatzir b'seichel hamadaber el seichel ha-shomeya. Yes, the famous formula. What is speech? Speech is the transmission of a picture from the mind of the speaker to the mind of the listener. That's what speech is about. So if a calls man shelo yeh borur umitukan, as long as it's not clear and fixed properly, kafi amitis hatzir, according to the truth of what it is, of the hine lo nema shehu megalo sobemes. You can't say that the language, the speech that you're using, is going to truly reveal what you have to say, unless, of course, it's mitukan, it's fixed up and it's clear. So if it's not, hine lo nomar shehu megalo sobemes velo magia oso ela shamo ba'amita. So ela shamo, it should be. And of course, if your language is not properly being used, so then the picture that you're trying to reveal will never be able to be broadcast to the person who's listening.
Yeah, you have an extra olive
so
there.
That's why he says, yeah.
It's supposed to say V'lo Magia,
That's what I
so
think.
El Shom
Yeah.
Oba Mitasa. I have the Sefer in front of me. That's what it says.
V'lo magia oso.
El. Pick out the ending
Yeah,
aleph.
yeah, right, correct. Whoops, I knew it was wrong. Makes sense. Ramchal makes sense. Great, very good. Okay, so that's the point here. So just like your conception has to be emes and borer, so the words that you use also have to be borer. They cannot be confused. Now he's going to give us some rules now, how to make sure that we're communicating clearly the ideas that we have in our mind. V'hinai nimsa. This is the first rule that's very proper that you protect, you guard, you watch out for. The first thing is that your language has to be clear. It discerns all the parts and clearly does that in a madrega, in all its parts and all its madrigas, which is, if you look at what he does in his book, right, especially when you see the charts and see it visually, that's exactly what he does in all his books, okay? He breaks things into large categories. After large categories, you get the subcategories, then you get the exceptions. So that's exactly what he tells you to do, because that's what he does himself. And there, if you use that method, you'll be able to communicate clearly what's in your mind. Now, he says like this, V'hine, be'inyano shel ha'maimer tolios M-E-T okozev meforsam alom meforsam. When it comes to the content of your statement, so of course you have to check that it's true and not false. I mean, the statement either is true or false. Or meforsam, below meforsam. Or it's a statement that you're saying is either well-known or not well-known, and he explained to us the difference. Okay, if it's not well-known, you're going to have to bring a proof. But when it comes to the words, b'kol b'chinosehem tolios bor or lo. So, but words, not a question of truth or false, or meforsam or not meforsam. There, we want to know, are they clear? Is the language you're using to express these ideas clear? And it's one of the greatness of the Ramchal that he has these very complex issues, and he's able to state them in very simple terms in their proper level. So he says, if your speech is going to be clear, they have to agree. Those words have to agree with what your intent is. It should be in total agreement. In other words, your words have to fit perfectly to your ideas. Of course, it's going to be challenged, and he's going to explain to us how to overcome challenges. But the first rule is that when you have a thought, you must be very careful with your speech in order to clothe that thought in the proper language. V'lo tachtia b'shum sad. Those words shouldn't stray from any angle. Lo be'eches, v'lo b'kamas, v'lo b'seder. Not in their quality, quantity, or in their order. And now the Ramchal is going to teach us how to check out our language to make sure that the words that we're using will be fitting for our ideas. So when I add things into his text, I use this pink color, and I just added a little color because you could see there's going to be a lot of categories and subcategories, and we can easily get lost. So we'll flip back to the chart here. Let's flip that back there if we can get it. Okay, so he just finished telling us as far as the content, there's one bechina of the mikram that we have to discuss about. That was eichos. And make sure that your content is true or not false, and make sure that it's either if it's well known, you don't have to bring a proof. It's not well known, you have to bring a proof. But now he wants to talk about the words. The words he's going to teach us. We have to check out our words as far as their quality, quantity, and the order. Now he's going to tell us the subcategories as he told us one should do. So the first thing is that one has to be medactic. What does that mean? Shen b'milos hahen tzir maspik l'tzayer hadavar shenirtze lahagadato v'lo tieh harosan b'loshen pachos mima shenirtze lahagido v'lo tieh harosan b'loshen pachos mima shenirtze lahagid b'mamaro. So he says like this. The first rule is you have to be very, very precise in the words that you pick. Those words that you pick to express your ideas should be sufficient for the hearer to recreate the picture that you have in your mind. And their message should not give a lesser message that you want to express or that you want to intend. Let's read that again. The word shouldn't express less than what you want to say. And they shouldn't be less than what you want to say in the statement. So again, there's content, and they have to express your content. And not less. He gives an example. Derek Mashal. Imritzinu lomar shelo kam navi od b'Yisrael kamosha. Say you want to say that there was never a prophet that arose in Israel like Moshe Rabbeinu. And you choose the words, you choose the following words. V'amarnu, Moshe haya gadol b'neviim. So you say Moshe was the greatest of the prophets. Okay, so he says, Hine lo ba'arnu b'miloseim mashu hu dai lahagid kavana. So you didn't express with these words that Moshe was the greatest of prophets, what you really wanted, what you intended to say. Ki yuvan b'mamareinu shemoshe haya min hagadolim b'neviim. By saying that he was a great prophet, so you can understand that he was. Excuse me again. Shemoshe haya min hagadolim shebeneviim ach lo haya sagadol shebehem. Those words would tell us that Moshe was one of the great prophets, but not that he was the greatest. Okay.
Right. So the best way to say it would be to say "Lekam Navi Od B'Yisrael Kamosha," like he says it.
Right. If he would have said he was the greatest of the prophets, that's what he did say, didn't he? Haya ha-gadol b'neviim.
The hey hayadiyah.
Hey hayadiyah, ha-gadol. I didn't catch that before. Or gadol sheb'neviim, or is the greatest of the prophets, or yachid b'neviim, or unique. So hine az ba'arnu kavanasenu. Then we really expressed what we intended in truth. So what was wrong here with the statement? We said Moshe haya gadol b'neviim. He was a great Navi. It doesn't mean he was the greatest. It means he was a great Navi. So there could have been other great Navis. So he tells us if you want to say he was the greatest, then you either have to say ha gadol or gadol sheb'neviim or yachid. So, using the wrong words express the wrong ideas. Now, of course, for us who learn Torah, the presumption that the Torah and the Chachamim speak precise and say what they mean is the beginning of our involvement in the Chumash and involvement in all Divrei Kodesh. Okay, because what we're trying to do is to recreate the exact message that the Kodesh Baruch Hu had in his hand, in his head, Kiviyachol, so to speak. So this is the first rule that when a person speaks, he has to be precise in his language to communicate exactly the idea that's in his mind. Because if not, then the communication will not be transferred accurately. Well, I'm not.
So in this example,
Yeah, go ahead.
is it
Yeah,
the
please.
first problem where it's loitia rasim balashon pachas mashin it's lahagidai, or is the second problem, or is it both? It sounds like
Oh, you mean of the first two? Yeah, well, you're definitely you're in this statement by saying Moshe was a great prophet. You're definitely giving a lesser message than you wanted to say.
right, so I think the problem is I don't hear
What's the second
clearly
one?
loitia rasim balashon pachas mashin it's lahagid b'maymar.
Okay, so
I'm not sure what the difference
that's
between the
true.
two are.
I'm going to explain the difference. I'm glad that you stopped me on that. Okay. The first one says, Lo Rasim Balashon Paksmi Mashinir Sal Hagido. And the second one says, Lo Mashinir Sal Hagid B'mamar. There's two things, what you want to say and what the statement says. There's what you're intending to say and then the words that you're using. So you have to make up your mind, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet, or he's just a great prophet? So your words, the words that you choose, can't be saying less than what you want to say. In other words, what do you want to say? Do you want to say he was the greatest prophet? Oh, that's what you want to say. So your words cannot transmit an idea which is less than that idea. Okay. And no, I'm not saying well. There's again the thought and the word. So the thought has to be clear in your mind. What do you want to say? He was the greatest Navi, or he was a great Navi? And then the words that you use in the statement have to express that idea. Okay? So I think that's what he wants to say.
Yeah, but
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, now the reason why I'm not clear about this is because he wants to say that Moshe was the greatest Navi. And what he said was he was just he wanted to say that, right, Moshe was the greatest Navi and there was never any other. And what he did say was Moshe Gadol Navim, he was a great Navi. So he's not transmitting the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest and then there never was and never will be a Navi like that. That's not getting transmitted with these words.
Right.
So therefore his Hayra'ah son, Balashon, is Pachas Mimashin Yitzal Hagidah. He wants to say that he was the greatest, never was, never will be, and he didn't transmit that. Now the second one, so I'm not sure what. So it sounds like he's saying that he just didn't say what he wants to say. It sounds like it's the same because the result is that he has a thought and he's not transmitting the thought. Unless in one case he is transmitting the thought, but it's just not giving all the details that he wants to.
Let me think again. Also, I'm with you.
Whereas lahagidoi, you see, he's changing over from lahagidoi, davar shenirtza lahagido, and then in the second one he's saying mima shenirtza lahagid b'maimar.
It can't. Pagos Mashin Yirtza Lahagido and Mash Pagos Yirtza Lahagid B'maimar. So I thought that the first one was the thought that the word is. He has to be clear about what he's broadcasting, and the words have to be clear. In other words, the words have to express exactly what he's saying, less than that. Okay. let's look
All
it
right,
over
let's
again.
right. Okay.
Here there's a slight difference, and we'll work it through again. Okay. Amnam, kamo shahamiut b'tzura hu chesron b'mamar. So just like the lessening of the picture is that you want to transmit is a sign that there's something missing. It's a weakness in the statement. Kain harabos yoter mimashu gam ken uchisron. He says also adding more than what's necessary in a statement to communicate your idea is also a weakness in the statement. Also, a statement is only considered pleasant when it's taskim ilosea bahorasan ima inyan hanir tzelaram izbam lo pochas velo yoter. The words have to agree with your idea, in other words, with the inyan. In other words, they're expressing that idea, not less or not more. Okay, so you can't. The words you use can't produce an insufficient. Can't be insufficient to produce your idea, but they also cannot be more extra. Okay, and that's why we're medactic in every word. The Chachamim tell us. Ulam kamosha horasan hamilot tzrichim lios medutekes. Just like the words being used have to express the idea in a precise way. Kain havanas roi tiyeh kala. He says the understanding of the words that you use should be easy. What does that mean? V'zeh ki hine devorim rabim yimotzu lehem shemos nirdafim shonim. A lot of things have synonymous terms. That means you could say the same thing in a lot of different ways. Amnam kutsasam yasmidu bam v'yorgilu bam bale aloshana yoter miktsasam. However, there's a group of those words that people are used to hearing and understand them more than the other uses of the word. Even though they're synonymous terms, they mean the same thing, but the simpler there's words that express the idea simpler and words that express the idea more complex way. So he says, v'chein shemos hamishutafim, also synonymous words, yomotzu mehem shiyoru shiyose regilim bam be'echas ha'avana shalahem mima shiyikolchum be'acheres. There's also words that sound the same, but their primary meaning, even though they sound the same, is A and not B. So he says, if you want to picture in the mind of the person who's listening properly, so ein lo levakesh milos nahogo shelo hugul bam ha medabrin. You should not pick words that are not commonly used by speakers. Ki afal pi shaharasan hala inyan amitis, even though they express the idea properly, truly, ein havanas krova, but they don't do it in a immediate way. V'hine yiskasher bam o yistaper b'chol shamol, and therefore the person who is listening will find it difficult, or he'll begin to have a suffix when he's hearing your words. V'lo yagid hu etachliso, v'lo yasig hu tachliso, and therefore the speaker is not going to gain his tachlit, which is the transmission of the idea. So he says here, language has there's a lot of different ways to express your ideas, but so always look for the simplest or primary use of a word, because even though you may find a more a less known word that expresses the same idea, since less people know it, it may cause a stop in some of the people who you are trying to communicate to. Okay, so that's his second rule. Okay.
Yeah, so you really have to know your
Now,
audience. You have to really get a good handle on your audience and what they understand, what words they use to describe things. Different audiences probably
exact,
may describe things differently.
exactly, exactly. And um, he's going to explain a little about the audience in a while also. But he's talking about language in general. If you look, there's in a dictionary, you'll see the primary usage of the word, the secondary usage of the word, the tertiary usage of the word. So he's trying to make sure that the communication is as smooth as possible. He says, so try to use the primary usage, whether it's a synonym or a homonym. He's going to get to the audience in a second. Okay, this is just a question of language itself. Which word do you pick to express your idea? Okay, that's the second rule. Let's go to the third rule. Va'od min hara'ui shtiyena hamilos na'us etzel ha'inyan hanirmas. Says the words should be appropriate to the content, the concept they're trying to express. We'll give an example there at Mashal. Im mi shirot zela hagid. If a person wants to say, Hios echad yoshev doeg misyare pen tiva uhu ra'a. Someone wants to say someone was sitting and worried and afraid what the future will bring, something bad that will happen in the future. Okay? And instead of, that's the idea he would like to express. But the words that he picks are Shahai Yoshev umetzapeh ben pen tavo ra. He was sitting and expecting when the evil would come. So he says, Hine zeh chisaron gadol. This is a very great lack in the statement. Why? Ki af al pi shalosh sipui yora al hamamtim l'davratid. Even though the word, yes, sipui means to look out for something in the future. Hine lo yevinu bal haloshen hamila zos ella mamtin l'tova. The word mitzapeh is always used in the context of looking toward the future for something good, but not bad. So by using the word mitzapeh, although it does mean to look out to the future, its connotation is to look for something good, and you want to say this person is looking for something, is looking toward the future for something bad. So you have to be careful about what's the proper usage of a language. He says, "Devorim elu iyavshar lahagbil lahem klalim." You can't really give any rules. Ella kol mila v'mila tzarich shetavo be'amitas harasan. But every word has to be investigated to understand what does this word transmit as an idea. Perish. Hatzir shiutzur mimenu b'seichel. What is this word going to create, what picture it's going to create in the mind of most people that hear it, of Rov Anashim Shishamo, ukafi zeh tusham bahagadot v'lo zulas zeh. And that's the word you should choose in expressing your idea, the one that most people will get that picture from. He says, however, sometimes you can break this rule if you want to use your language in a crafty way and with wisdom, as I'm going to explain to you in the book. Okay, so this is a rule that can be broken in order you could shake someone up by purposely trying to confuse them by using a strange word, and that is also a rhetorical method that he's going to explain later on. But if your first job is to communicate your idea clearly, which means that the word has to have the proper import. The words that you're picking have to have the proper import. Okay. So that was his discussion of echus, okay, and the words have to be didactic. They should not say greater or lesser than what you want to say. They should be simple to understand, using their primary meanings and not any third or fourth meaning or obscure meaning. And third, they should be appropriate to what you have to say. As he said, the word mitzapeh has a connotation of looking for good, and if you're looking for bad, it's an improper use of the language. Okay, now he's going to talk about the amounts of words that you use, commas. Okay, notice he's taking these bechinot in his subject of echos and commas, and he's trying to ascertain the various parts of dibur so that we can speak properly. So when it comes to commas, he says the following: Hine hamilos hanemaros lahagid inyan ma. The words that you use to express your idea, tzarech tihena kol kach sheyilakach mehem tzir shalem ala inyanahu shelo yimatzeh chelek mimeno asher lo yivuar b'milosahen. He says the amount of words you use have to be sufficient to give a complete picture, a tzir sholem, a complete picture of your idea, so that there won't be any portion of the concept that you're trying to communicate that will not be expressed by this word. There won't be any portion of this picture that won't be covered by the language that you're using. So your language has to be sufficient to cover the complete idea that you're trying to express. Omnam, kol mila asher lo tosif chelek b'tzira inyan klal, any word that doesn't add to the picturing of the concept, hine hamila hu miuteret legamre, the word is totally extraneous. Uvoa b'mamra eno ela irbuv bo, and not only that, extraneous would be one nikuda, one point that it would be bad, but what it will do is just confuse the listener. Ugoremes bilbul b'havanaso, and cause him to be totally confused in your in understanding what you're trying to say. Va'amnam kamo shatosefes chesron gam hagirion chesron kamohu, just like adding words is a lack in your communication of your picture. Gam, so too is the lack. It's also not going to recreate the picture actually. Ki im lo yiva'enu hamilos kol chelke hadibur, because if your words don't picture the complete concept, hine ein hatzir hamatzayir al yadam tzir sholem. So if the words that you pick are less than necessary to recreate the picture, so then of course the picture that's recreated in the mind of the listener won't be complete. Va'amnam gam zeh v'gam zeh yaseh lefamim ala chachma. However, this rule is sometimes broken by those who are wise. V'yoel lamamra u'kamoshes chilufnim, and they'll help us with the statement. So the general rule, don't add and subtract, but he's warning us that we're going to learn places where saying a little less, saying a little more could be a tachbula, a method to arouse the audience. Okay, so but as far as communication, the first rule is not to have it. Ach stam hagadaroi shetiyamilos yaspiku. But in speech, when we're not trying to motivate anyone or shock them, so then the words should be sufficient to, let's say, to picture the concept you're trying to get, and it shouldn't be not less or more. Of course, the famous story of the Vilna Gaon, he read Mesil Shasharm, he couldn't find an extra word in the first 3 chapters. Okay, so that's Mesil Shasharm, and that's the Ramchal. Every word is picked. The statements are crafted and not just said spontaneously. The words are crafted so that they communicate the idea exactly. Omnam, kfar efshar b'zeh hashiur atzmo sheyeh מקצר יותר או מעריך יותר, ואף על פי כן לא יצא מגבול הגדרה המסופקת. This is what you brought up before. The Ramchal says it's possible that the amount of words you use can be a little less or more than necessary to recreate the complete picture, and it won't be considered a failing of your communication. He says, "Va'af al pi kein lo yimotzeh lo yotzeh migvul hagada hamisupekas." They won't go out of the definition of sufficient communication. B'shelo yeh hatosefes v'giron el b'ma shehim otzu yoel v'hedru lo yazid. The addition or the lack is actually going to be a help. B'shelo yeh hatosefes v'giron el b'ma shehim, let's say, yoel v'hedru lo yazid. Sometimes saying a little more, saying a little less is not going to be damaging. Now he's going to explain that, and this is your audience problem. Perishal. You can leave out B'katsas Tanai Inyan U Shib'eram Enom Mutalagamre. Sometimes when you're trying to give a talk, you can leave out certain conditions, and those conditions, even though you left them out, is not going to be a lack. Okay, B'katsas Tanai Inyan Shib'eram Enom Mutalagamre. I'm sorry. Some Tanaim Indian that you explain is not going, you can explain it tonight and it won't be considered an addition. Let's see what he says. Shahari kvar efshar l'seichel min ha'schalim shelo yagish bam im lo yivaru lo v'hashtika mehem lo tiyeh chesron. Yes, he says sometimes you don't have to spell out all the elements of the idea you're trying to express. Why? Shekvar ro b'nei adam yizbanon osam af shelo yivrim, because most people understand them even without you saying them. So you don't have to go, beating a dead horse. We understand, though there's certain tanais there's certain conditions in any topic that you're trying to present, which you're going to understood. Now we have to read this whole paragraph because it's very, very, very important things here, especially about our learning. Omnam b'zeh pol harbe hateva hamidabrim. This spelling out more or less is an aspect of a lot of people who, the teva, the nature of a lot of people who speak, or what's considered acceptable for speakers, depending on what country you are, what language you're speaking. Sheyesh mi shebetivo marich. There's certain people who like to spell things out more, b'dibaro, umivora hatanayim ha'elu shezecharno, explain every single part, every tanai, every condition. Umi shebetivo mekatzer v'yishtoch mima shizbananu bobli yivora. And there's other people who like to speak in a much shorter language and be quiet about all the various aspects. Omnam be'emes yesh eis likatzer v'yesh eis larich. In truth, we'll find that there's certain times that we should speak succinctly, and other times where we should elaborate. Lefi ha'inyan, lefi ha'shomim, lefi ha'shar, or lefi ha'kavana. He identifies 4 places where we may speak a little greater at length or less at length, depending upon the subject matter you're talking about, the audience, the time you have to speak, or your intention. And I'll explain, as he always does, those categories. Ki ha'inyanim ha'mukim v'dakim yitztarich bam bir rachav mizuasam. Things which are very profound or very subtle, they'll need more of an explanation than other things. So there you would have to be, if it's a new concept or a subtle concept, you're going to have to spell that concept out more than others, because just by saying a brief definition will not be sufficient for the listener to understand what you're talking about. Ve'im hanavonim, here's your audience, people who understand what you're talking about. This is what we call expert text. Ein tzarich ribu hadavarim hamitzarech in yoter kasha havana. Those people who are, if you're speaking to an audience of people who are wise and clever, then you're not going to have to speak as much as if you're speaking to people who have more difficulty in understanding. Sometimes your time limitations mean that you have to say quite a lot in a small amount of time. Then if you're going to have to translate, if you have a short amount of time, then you're going to have to say things briefly. And what about the makavein? It depends upon also whether you elaborate or not, depending on what your intentions are. If you're makaven the sadeh klalim, if you want to make a group of rules, shiskaru nakala velo yishachu roi shikatze v'loshano. If you're going to give a rule book that people are going to find it easy to remember and not to forget, so then you should use the briefest language as possible. But if you want to explain some profound idea or subtle idea, but if you want to explain an idea, so then explanations have to be longer. Everything similar. In other words, here he's telling us, although his first rule is to be precise, you have to know that it's a plastic rule, which means that if you're dealing with experts, then you don't have to spell out all the premises. Okay, and that's one of the big problems in learning Gemara, for instance. Gemara is an expert text. It's written for Chachamim. It's written to be understood by Chachamim, which means that there's a lot of background premises that you need to learn. The simplest one is when people learn Gemara, they should be well aware of the Mishnah. And when people learn the Mishnah, they should be well aware of the Chumash. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't happen, but the people in the Gemara are at a very high level of understanding and are an expert level of understanding, and they're communicating to experts. So what we have to do, of course, to get to that level is to Achronim, Rishonim, to help us get to the level to understand what their concepts are, and we have to do the proper research. But the problem in learning, one problem, as he stated here, is that it's talking to, there are Chachamim talking to Navonim. The text is written for Talmidei Chachamim. And the other problem is that there's a lot of information that has to be transmitted and remembered. It's not just a intellectual study. It's a living knowledge that you must have in order to live, so that there's loads of information that has to be broadcasted and understood and remembered. And therefore, Mekatzer, speaking in a very brief language, is the order of the day. Okay, but here we can see why people have difficulties in learning, is because they're not sensitive to the background information and the methods that the Chacham use to communicate, which are very, very, very brief and also have a language in and of themselves. So that's his the end of this section. Oh, we have to do Seder. Seder when we finish. Seder is the third part. I'm sorry. You had Kamas, Efes, and Seder. And he says, Uveseder sheyishma'u, sheyushmu hanose v'hanose hakesher v'gvulim v'seder k'yuri.
Sheyusmu, it's a sin.
To what?
I don't know what it means. Sheyusmu.
Sheyusmu, like Yusam. Anyway, you should present, interesting, you should present the subject, predicates, kesher, and the definitions in an orderly way. Shelo yeh hashomeya note mehavanas hamamar mimashin shenachon bo, so that the ear of the hearer shouldn't stray in his understanding of your statement. o nisham supak, or be in doubt. So your presentation has to be clear. Okay. ובכלל זה כל מה שהוא טעוס לפי הדקדוק. And of course, in this concept of Seder, you have to make sure that your language is free of any mistakes in dikduk, in shemos, in amilos, in polim. Make sure that your grammar is correct. So he has now defined, let's go back to the chart here. Okay, so he told us that the speech that's used has to all speech has two parts: inyan, which is the content of what you're trying to say, and the words that you use. So in the content, he says he defines what's called eichus ha'inyan, that you make sure that your content is true, not false, of course, and make sure that it's if it's not enforced on, then you have to bring proofs. If it's enforced on, you don't. Then in the words that you use, he told us watch their eichus, kamos, and seder. In the eichus, he told us that the words that you use have to clearly express your idea. You shouldn't say less than that or more than that. The words that you pick should be the primary uses of the language, not secondary, or if there's an easy word to use or more understood word, we would use it, okay? Also, they should be fitting. You shouldn't use a word in its improper connotation, like he said, mitzape it connotes looking for something good, don't use it for something bad. And then we went through quality. He said that, quantity, the amount of words that you use, you have to use the right amount of words to express the idea in its entirety. The amount of words have to be, each word has to be necessary. You can't have an extra word or a lesser word, or you'll confuse the listener. And then he told us some exceptions when you're allowed to spell things out more, or to be makatzer more in certain conditions. So if you have profound ideas, then you should spell things out more than necessary, or than strictly necessary. If your audience is less clever, then spell out things more. If they're more clever, you can say things more briefly. Time considerations. If you have a lot to say in a short amount of time, of course you have to say things more briefly. And then also your intent. If your intent is to give people a rule book, so say things as briefly as possible so they'll learn and remember them. But if you want to explain things, then you have to take your time in explaining it. Okay, that's and then he spoke about Seder. Of course, you have to always decide your statements in such a way that they'll communicate the idea. First things first, and you better check out your grammar and spelling and cross your T's and I's, and also that'll be part of Seder. Okay, so we are, Baruch Hashem, we finished chapter 2, and Bezrat Hashem will go on to do chapter 3 the next time we meet.